We're going live.
Okay.
We're going live.
Tell me when I'm on.
I don't know. It doesn't show me.
Could we be live?
Maybe it doesn't start until the exact start time.
Oh. Ask Steph, maybe.
No, it's still not. Oh, yeah, you're.
Is it live?
Yeah, I'm hearing all of this.
That's amazing. Hi, everybody. Welcome to my very well choreographed live. I have to thank a couple of people before we get started. And while I'm doing this, please put your name and where you're tuning in from so we can see where, how far off people are. But I want to thank my husband, Graham, for doing all the tech stuff for me because I have a very interesting relationship to technology and I would never be able to pull this off without him. And also to Stephanie, who works with me, who keeps everything running and makes sure that you have all the information that you need. So it takes a village, and I have the best village. So thank you. So yeah, do we have people in there?
We sure do.
Okay.
We have Angela from Fairfax County, Virginia.
Okay, awesome.
And Tony
Hi.
from Las Vegas.
Tony, you said?
Tony.
Tony. Hi, Tony.
And JL from Woodruff, South Carolina. And Deborah Hall from Woodward. Barb Lando from Montreal.
Mm-hmm. Great. Oh, so from all over.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Another
Graham
from
grew
South
up
Carolina.
in Montreal, so shout out to Montreal.
Bonnie from a place in Florida I can't pronounce.
That's awesome.
Sasa, Florida.
I'm sure that people think the same thing about towns in Minnesota.
Yeah.
There's
Annette
some crazy ones.
Annette from the Twin Cities.
Oh, hi, local. Hello.
Becca from Sedona, Arizona.
Oh, wow, from all over. This is awesome. Thank you.
Linda Lee in Alabama. AB from Reading, Pennsylvania.
Yeah. I used to live in Allentown, which isn't too far from there. So.
Beth Starr in California, and Laura from Washington.
Amazing.
And Debbie Lawrence from Nova Scotia.
Oh, lots of Canadians. Awesome. Well, welcome. And it's, I think it's 1 now, right? So we'll get started.
1, yeah.
Well, thanks again for tuning in. I'm so excited to share this recipe and my new book, which will come out on September 3rd. So this is like a little pre-baking from it. And I chose this recipe today. We're gonna do my perfect chocolate chip cookie. And the reason that I named it that is because I set up an entire lab in the book. It's called the Chocolate Chip Cookie Lab. It's part of my Zoë Bakes Academy, or Zoe's Cookie Academy. And the reason that I did this is because what is perfect to me in a chocolate chip cookie may not be perfect to you. And so I wanted to give you all the information on how to make your perfect chocolate chip cookie. So I'm gonna bake it and mix it the way that it's written, but I'm giving you all the information, and I'll talk a little bit about that today, on how to make it perfect for you. So if you like it crisper, if you like it cakier, if you want it sweeter, if you want it to have ripples, there's so many different ways to make a chocolate chip cookie. And this is the recipe where in the book, I really wanted to encourage you to play. So I'm gonna go ahead and do it as it's written, and then talk about maybe some variations that you can do to adjust the recipe. But once you get a hold of the book, just in a few days, so hopefully you've all pre-ordered it, there's lots of information, and I show you, like, if you add more flour or less flour or more baking soda or less baking soda, I show you exactly what will happen. So let's get started on the recipe. The first thing that I do is just measure everything out. So I have it all right there and ready to go. This recipe uses both butter and shortening. I love butter. I love, love, love the flavor of butter, but it makes things spread. So I add just a little bit of shortening so that they won't spread as much. So I have other recipes in the book that are just butter and they spread and they're crispy. There's also recipes in the book that call for melted butter. So there's all different kinds of chocolate chip cookies, but for this recipe, I'm using some butter, some shortening. I had a question on Instagram about temperature of the butter. So what does room temperature butter actually mean, and what does it look like? So I usually suggest you take your butter out of the refrigerator at least an hour before you're gonna bake. And I guess that somewhat depends on the temperature of your kitchen. So maybe in Nova Scotia or Montreal, it's a little bit chillier in the winter. You might wanna take it out even farther in advance. So, but this is what room temperature butter should look like. It's quite warm in here. Okay, so when I pick this up, it'll keep its shape so it doesn't like droop down. I'm able to pick it up. It still looks like a stick of butter, but I can also stick my finger into it. Can you see that? Do you see the down
I can.
shot?
Want to try it again?
Yeah, okay, so see how when I stick my finger in it, it easily goes into it. So that's room temperature butter. If it's too hard and it's resisting, it's just not gonna cream together with the rest of the ingredients well. In the book, I give several suggestions on how to speed up the process. So if you've forgotten, if you all of a sudden need an emergency batch of cookies, I've got you. There's several ways that you can get butter to room temperature faster than just letting it sit. And those are all in the book. So I have my room temperature butter. I'm gonna get that right into my bowl. Oh, you know what I should do is get this. Can you even see the mixer, Gray? No, okay, let me move this. I'm gonna get my mixer up here. You can do this with a hand mixer. But if you've ever seen my show or some of my other YouTube videos, I usually end up wearing the entire recipe. So I love my stand mixer. It does so much of the work for me. So I'm just gonna let it. So I use a paddle attachment. My very favorite is this one that has the rubber edge on it because that will scrape the bowl for me as I'm doing it, so I don't have to scrape quite as much, but you still have to scrape throughout. Okay, so I'm gonna put my butter into the mixer. Before I get started with that, so I don't forget later as I'm talking, I want to mix together all of my dry ingredients. So I have my flour all measured out. The book is both in measuring cups and weights. If you've been following me for any amount of time, you know that I love my scale more than anything. This is the one that I use, and we can link to it below. Or in the recipe. I just love it, and that way your recipes just come out more consistently. This is my new favorite product. It's called Diamond Crystal Baking Salt, and what it is it's kosher salt that is ground really, really finely. So I've always used kosher salt in all of my recipes. The reason that I love this is because it's ground finely, it dissolves into recipes really well and it just distributes really well. So Diamond Crystal baking salt goes into it. I like to mix all of my dry ingredients together and whisk them together before I start. Here is some baking soda to give my cookies the rise and then also some crisp to them. I just need to grab a whisk. I'll be right back. And I'm just gonna whisk this all together. I like to whisk it together so that the salt and the baking soda distribute really well in the recipe. If you've ever baked a batch of cookies and some of them puff up and are kind of, have a lot of body to them, and then some are totally flat and crispy, it's because the cookie dough wasn't completely mixed together well, and also it can be because the baking soda and the salt are not distributed evenly. So just by doing this little bit of whisking beforehand, we're gonna make sure that our cookies are consistent throughout the batch. Okay, so back to my butter. I'm just gonna cream this for just a few seconds. I am going to take questions. I'm going to do that at the end, unless I'm doing something that is completely confusing people. I will get to your questions, I promise. Okay, so I'm just going to stir this together, and because the butter is room temperature, it's going to go together really quickly. I just like to cream the butter to make sure that it's a really good consistency. If you have let the butter get to room temperature that I showed you before, this should only take a few seconds. If your butter is a little bit on the cooler side and it's harder, you really want to make sure that it's nice and creamy. The reason that we're doing that is because if you get solid lumps of butter into your cookie dough, once they hit the oven, they're gonna spread and you're gonna get a really thin spot. So you just wanna make sure everything is nice and consistent. The shortening goes in, again at room temperature. Shortening actually warms up very, very quickly. It doesn't have the same water content or solids in it. It's pure fat. And so it really warms up to room temperature quite quickly. I'm gonna blend those two. Again, just for, if they're at the proper temperature, just a few seconds is fine. And then I'm going to scrape the bowl. As you know, I am a big proponent of scraping. And just like I said before, just because if your cookie dough is nice and even as you're mixing, it's going to make them bake more evenly. So it's just a few seconds of extra work that makes a really big difference. Okay, so if you were, when you get the book and you see the Cookie Lab, you can absolutely bake these with all butter. You do not have to use the shortening. It's totally up to you. If you want them crisper, if you want them super duper buttery, you can absolutely do that. You can actually increase the amount of shortening as well, and they won't spread as much. They'll be cakier and just have a different texture to them. Oh, I'm about to lose this. Okay. Cream that together for another second, and now I'm gonna add my sugar. I'm adding some granulated white sugar. Granulated white sugar melts and spreads in the cookie and it caramelizes. And I'm also adding brown sugar. You can use light brown sugar or dark brown sugar. Dark brown sugar has a little bit more molasses added into it, and so it's obviously darker, and it also has a slightly more intense flavor because of the brown sugar. The brown sugar, because it has the molasses, will actually make the cookies a little bit cakier. because it has moisture in it and it reacts with the gluten in the flour, and it just makes it cakier and also softer. So if you want a super duper crispy cookie, you would have less brown sugar and more white sugar. It's all in the book. So I'm just bringing you through some of the experimentation that I did, and hopefully that you'll do too. Okay, so both of these into the bowl. You'll notice that I covered the brown sugar. Brown sugar has a tendency to clump up if it's exposed to air. And so I want to make sure that it's nice and soft and can blend into the recipe. Okay, here we go. Stir those two together until it's nice and creamy and even. Gray, they can see into the bowl, right?
Yep.
Okay.
And the picture.
Oh, perfect. Of course, vanilla extract. I make homemade vanilla extract. It is simply vanilla beans that have like marinated in vodka for months, for at least 3 months, to get it really nice and dark like this. I have a recipe for that in the book as well.
There's a YouTube video too.
Oh, and I have a YouTube video as well. Maybe we can link to that. I'm sure Stephanie thought of all this, so. Okay, scrape this down just in case some of that butter is clinging to the bottom and to the paddle. But it looks really good. It looks like everything is creaming together. I don't have any lumps of butter in there. I don't have any lumps of brown sugar. And so I can just carry on. I'm gonna add my glug of vanilla extract. Another little glug of it. Mix that all together, and then in go my eggs. Just a few seconds. That looks great. Okay, so this is what we've got. It's clinging to the paddle attachment. It still has some body. If you've ever seen me do a creaming method for cakes, I really want to incorporate some air into it because that's what helps to leaven a cake. So I'm not necessarily trying to get a ton of air in this. I'm just trying to cream them together so that they're nice and uniform. If you want a cakier cookie, you can incorporate more air into it, and that will help it rise. So again, it's like one of these things where there's so many variables to getting the cookie that you might want. Or you can just follow the recipe as I wrote it, and I think they're awesome. Eggs, again, room temperature, so that if you put cold eggs into warm butter, you're gonna seize the butter up. So we want everything to be the same temperature. I'm just doing this at like a medium-low speed. I'm not getting, like I said, I'm not whipping a ton of air into it. Okay, second one. Try not to get any of the shells. Okay. When I was doing the show, my least favorite thing to do was to crack eggs on camera because it was always so awkward and slightly embarrassing if I got shells in there. Okay, so let me just scrape this down, cream it a little bit more, and then we are ready for our dry ingredients and our chocolate. I am using all-purpose flour. The difference between brands of all-purpose flour is sometimes kind of significant. So like a gold medal flour has a pretty medium protein content. There's the poodle. And so this recipe that I baked today was done with gold medal flour. If you use King Arthur flour, it has a slightly higher protein content, and these will end up being slightly cakier. They won't spread quite as much. So again, you can play with the type of flour that you're using and get a different cookie. Just cream that just enough to make sure everything is well blended. And then in goes my flour and dry ingredients all at once. And I'm just going to stir this until it's coming together. I don't need to do it completely because I'm going to continue stirring it, or I'm going to continue mixing it once I put my chocolate in there. Okay. On low speed so that the flour doesn't fly all over the kitchen, which I did in, what was that video that I did where and Graham is also my editor and left that in. Okay, so that looks great. We have everything. Everything is mixed together. Now we get to add the star of the show, and that is the chocolate. So I am using a combination of milk chocolate and dark chocolate. It was really just sort of a hodgepodge of chocolate that I have in my chocolate drawer, whatever I had available. So there are no rules. You can use any kind of chocolate that you love. Super, super bittersweet, milk chocolate. You could put white chocolate chips in here. Also nuts. I don't have nuts in this particular recipe, but add them. It would be delicious. Or, you know, M&Ms or whatever you want in your chocolate chip cookies can go in here. Okay, into the bowl. I'm just gonna stir this with the machine for a couple of rotations, and then I'm gonna just stop with the machine and give it a good stir with the spatula. Okay. Get rid of this. Okay, first I want to get all the stuff off of the paddle attachment, and then I want to give it a good stir because I want to make sure that all of that butter and sugar and everything that's in the recipe is uniformly blended, because like I said before, your cookies as you're baking will come out evenly if everything is stirred together properly. So you can see I have some flour clinging to the bowl. Get right down in there to the bottom and make sure all the butter is blended in. But this looks pretty good. And also make sure all the chocolate is in there. So let me talk about chocolate and the amount of it. For me, a chocolate chip cookie should have lots of chocolate in it. Graham likes less chocolate. So I make this sort of a medium amount of chocolate. In the actual recipe, I give you a range. So depending on how you like it, you can change the amount of chocolate that's in there. And then what I do is I take a sheet tray that has parchment on it, and I'm just gonna scoop all of these cookies onto the parchment and refrigerate them. The refrigerating sets everything up, it marries everything, meaning all of the ingredients sort of absorb together and make for in my opinion, a better cookie. So you can bake them right away. They may spread a little bit more. You can refrigerate them for an hour or up to like 3 days, or you can even freeze them. I freeze almost all of my cookies so that I have cookie balls at the ready whenever I want them. Okay, Gray, while I'm scooping this, are there any questions that I can answer?
Sifting versus weighing.
Oh,
no, sifting versus non-sifting.
oh, okay, great question. The way that a recipe is written will tell you everything you need to know about sifting. So if a recipe says 1 cup or 120 grams of flour, of all-purpose flour, and it doesn't say anything about sifting, then you do not sift. If the recipe says 1 cup of sifted flour, then you sift the flour into the cup. I actually have YouTube videos all about this. And then the last variation of this is 1 cup flour sifted, and then you measure the flour first and then sift it. But if the recipe doesn't say anything about sifting, don't sift it. Sifting the flour into the cup aerates it, so you get much less of it. Sifting the flour after the fact also aerates it, so you'll see that in cake recipes mostly. The only time I would say that you want to sift flour is if it has lots of clumps in it. And the one that does that is cake flour. So for most cookie recipes, absolutely unnecessary and just an extra step.
They should check out how to measure flour with a cup.
How to measure flour with a cup on YouTube, on the Zoë Bakes YouTube channel, and I go over all about flour, and I have a couple of YouTube videos about flour because I can get a little obsessive with flour. But it's a great question because the way that you measure your flour makes a difference. So you'll notice that I am scooping these and putting them right next to each other. It's because they're going into the refrigerator and not into the oven. Obviously, if I'm gonna bake these, I need to space them out quite a bit. If I were to bake them like this, I would end up with one giant cookie or a blondie, I suppose. So go ahead and shove this into an 8-inch square pan and bake it right next to each other, and you'll get a blondie, which would be delicious. And I have plenty of recipes for those too. Okay, more questions?
Zoe, can you mention what size scoop you're using?
Oh yes, okay, great. Thank you. So you will see this one is a 20. I have an entire diagram in the book about the different scoops, and every single recipe in the book, I give the number and the tablespoons for the size that I'm recommending. However, you can switch it up. You don't have to have big cookies. I actually did 2 different sizes here. You can do that. It's just that when you change the size of it, you also have to change the baking time. And so in the recipe, I'll give you the baking time for whatever scoop I've recommended, and then say, reduce the amount of time if you're going smaller. So I did do some cookies with the same cookie dough with a smaller scoop because sometimes that's what you want. So I'm gonna leave the rest of this. Great, I have some already refrigerated cookie dough. Perfect, thank you. So this has been in the refrigerator for a couple of days. This is how I wrap it. This is a very sort of restaurant level wrapping job because it depends on how long you're wrapping them for, or refrigerating them for rather. You can just drape them if it's an hour. If you're doing it for a couple of days, I really recommend that you wrap all the way around so that you're not drying out the dough balls. And then also, this is how, if I was gonna freeze it on the sheet, this is how I would wrap it so that you're not absorbing all the flavors from your freezer onto your cookie dough, because the cookie dough loves to absorb flavors. Having said that about the freezing, I like to freeze the cookie dough balls and then bake them fresh instead of baking the cookies and freezing the cookies, because I just find fresh baked cookies are awesome. What I'll usually do instead of taking up freezer space with my sheet pan is I will scoop them, chill them, and then put them into a Ziploc bag and mark what they are and when I made them. So, okay, so now I can, these are refrigerated, and now I can put them on the tray to bake them. I like to line the tray with parchment paper so that they're easy to clean up. And what I will do, first let me just tell you what I've done here. When I go to bake a cookie, can you see all this, Gray?
Yep.
When I go to bake a batch of cookies, especially if it's the very first time that I've done it, or I've done some experimenting, so it's not exactly the same as the last time I bake them, I will bake one cookie on the sheet just to see how much they're gonna spread, how long does it take them to bake. If you have the time, this can save you the heartache of all your cookies melting together in the oven. They're still delicious, but they just might not look the way you want them to. So baking one is a great way to sort of test the batch, find out how long it is, find out how far they're gonna spread. So this one, same exact batch, different baking times. And so this one went for a little bit longer, it's a little bit crisper. This one was 2 minutes shorter and it's a little bit softer. So all of this information is in the book. It's in the Baking Academy section, the Cookie Academy. You can go there if you're inclined to, if you want to know these things. If you just want the recipes and you just want to bake them as is, you can do that too. You don't have to experiment with any of this stuff. I just personally think it's a lot of fun. Okay, yes?
Quick question
Sure.
about bake times. If you have 6 cookies on the thing, will it take the same as if you do that one test?
It's such a good question. I love you people. It'll probably, you'll probably need to increase the time by like a minute. If you're only doing one tray, it's not going to change it by that much. If you have to, like around the holidays, you can't do one tray at a time. Most of the cookies I recommend one tray at a time if you can, but around the holidays, that's just not realistic. If you have multiple trays in the oven, it's obviously going to take longer, and you're going to want to rotate those trays. Again, all of this stuff is in the book as well. Okay, so the last thing that I wanted to show you about getting the cookies in the oven is, you know, on Instagram, you have these like perfect pools of chocolate. The way that you get that is by reserving a little bit of your, here, I'm gonna just get this. Oh, do you wanna take it? Thank you. Just reserving a little bit of your chopped chocolate or your chocolate chips, whatever you decide to use, and putting it right onto the top. That way, when the cookie is baking and melting, that beautiful pool of chocolate will stay nice and clean and shiny, and it won't have any dough mixed into it. So this is how those Instagram cookies get to be so perfect looking. You can add another, this is also a preference thing. You can add another little sprinkle of kosher salt or finishing salt on top of here if you like that. I like it. Graham, again, doesn't like to bite into a big thing of salt. So it's your preference. It's your cookie. You do with it as you wish. Okay, more questions?
Sandra from Atlanta, Georgia asks, convection or regular oven?
Okay, so this is such a good question. In every single recipe I tell you, if I recommend convection heat, I'll also give conventional heat or flat heat temperatures as well, because not everybody has a convection oven. So I give both if I recommend it at all. For most of the recipes, it's just a regular flat conventional heat. But once in a while, there are recipes like the one on the cover. This is what's called the smash cookie. And it is baked like a giant baseball. And then after it comes out of the oven, you smash it. And they're delicious and they're wonderful. But to get that beautiful, crispy, golden outside, I recommend baking it with convection heat if you have it. If you don't, like I said, I also give regular flat heat.
Do you have any gluten-free recipes in the book?
Some of the recipes are just naturally gluten-free. I don't necessarily give gluten-free alternatives to every single recipe. However, I have tried several of them gluten-free. My favorite chocolate chip recipe in the book that for gluten-free is the crisp chocolate chip cookie. And that is, it's similar to this, except it's all butter. It's very, very crispy and thin, and it has like ripples. Let me see if I can't find it real quick. Oh, here we go. Look at that. Oh, this is hilarious. The notes that I have right here are my gluten-free notes. So I went through and I baked a bunch of them gluten-free just to see which ones I liked. Okay, so this, can you see that? Mm-hmm. These are the crisp cookies, crisp chocolate chip cookies, and they are excellent with gluten-free flour. The flours that I've tested are better batter. And I think that one is mostly available online. I've also done Cup for Cup, Bob's Red Mill, King Arthur, all the big names I've tested with, and just they were great in that cookie. Like I said, some of the cookies in the book are just naturally gluten-free, and so you don't have to substitute. Yeah, I find the crisper, thinner cookies are more successful. Like the graham crackers are great with gluten-free and that kind of thing. Are there more?
We had a question about silicone mats.
Oh,
and,
yeah. Okay.
Nancy mentioned that she finds her cookies don't crisp as much on the bottom.
Yes.
If you're using a silicone mat versus parchment paper.
Yes. Okay. This is such a great point. And there's two things about it. I cover all of this stuff in the equipment section of the book. There's a couple of different things that go on. And one of the things is knowing your oven, because some people have the heating element on the bottom, and so their cookies tend to get too crisp on the bottom. And so in some cases, like if I have a cookie that has a longer baking time, I'll actually suggest that you bake it on doubled up sheet trays. So let me show you. So like if, like this, so that you have this cushion of air between the heat and your cookie. You can do the same thing by putting a silicone liner under your parchment paper. The silicone liner is like an insulator, and so you're not getting that intense heat. And sometimes, especially if you want a crisp cookie, it's going to prevent it from getting the heat that it needs to make it crisp. So you can sort of play with your cookies. Like if things tend to be getting too dark, you can double up the tray or use a liner. I like to bake the cookies on parchment that's on top of the liner and not directly on the liner. There's a couple of exceptions of cookies that I want to really spread, and they spread beautifully on a silicone liner. So again, lots of information in the book. In every single recipe, I give the recommendation that worked best for me. And so I think that'll be helpful too.
38 minutes already.
Okay, great. That's good. If we have, so this is how I would bake them. I bake them in the middle of the oven, 375 for about 12 minutes, works really well in my oven. Again, every oven is different, so baking times are not necessarily the rule. They are a guide. And so watch your first batch so that you know how your oven is working and so that you get the cookies that you want. This is how they came out after. I bake them just like this. And so like I had said earlier, I baked some that were big and some that were little. You can play with the sizes. Just make sure that you're adjusting the time in the oven. And so I have a link to the recipe. I have lots and lots of this information right on the website with this recipe. This is going to be the Zoe's Baking Academy Challenge for my newsletter. So if you subscribe to my newsletter, you'll have all of the information on how to enter the challenge. I'm giving away 10 copies of my book. So I hope you will join the challenge. Make these cookies however you want them to be. This is your perfect cookie. Share them. All the instructions are going to be right in my newsletter. So subscribe to the newsletter. I think there's a link on this YouTube. And it'll have all the information. And also remember, if you pre-ordered the book, you still have, I think, a day, maybe 2 days to get your free ebook. And so we'll have information about that too. And I can't wait for you to have the book and to be baking from it and see everything that you're baking. And thank you for coming and joining me. I will put this up on YouTube, so it'll be here if you need more reference. Oh, and there's...
2 things.
Yes, okay.
First, people would like to know when the next live is.
Oh, I'm not sure. I'm going on book tour, and then when I get back, I'll do another one. Yeah, that's great. I would love to do more of these, if you'll do them with me.
Okay. And then the second thing
Yes.
is, it is Laurel Bowen from Edmonton, Alberta, Canada's birthday today.
Oh, happy birthday, Laurel. That's fantastic. Thank you for joining me. This is amazing. I love that you spent your birthday with me. Thank you. And happy baking. Oh, and don't forget, you can get a t-shirt too. Graham designed the t-shirts. So anyway, thank you for joining me. I love doing this, and I'm so excited for you to have the book. So thank you, and thank you, Graham. That was awesome.